everybody. Welcome to Lead Like a Boss. We've got another great episode for you. We've got Dan Thomson from Sensay. And I know I've had a lot of AI folks on the show lately, but I think you're going to love the twist that Dan brings to the whole equation. Dan, welcome to Lead Like a Boss.
Excited to share some of the thoughts on AI and some future technology as well.
Yeah. So Dan, why don't you just give us a really quick overview of what Sensei is, and then we'll get into the story about kind of what brought you here.
Yeah, sure. So Sensei creates sales chatbots for e-commerce and real estate as a couple of primary markets. But it actually stems from this whole idea of digital immortality from a couple of books that I wrote on the topic about 7 or 8 years ago. So way before AI kind of exploded into the popular domain, even though some of us AI geeks were still deep in the trenches at that point. And so right now, even though we basically create these hyper-personalized chatbots that enable anyone to especially with online stores, for example, create a sort of a personal replica of themselves as a CEO or as a lead salesperson or a brand ambassador to have as a hyper personalized natural language chatbot that is much better than the average sort of generic, boring, responses that you would get. This one actually has personality, it has character, it has all the files and information that you could possibly want, as well as be acting like your best salesperson, CEO, which gives you that real, I guess, connection back between your customers and your team, especially when working in these sort of online businesses. And so we kind of like to say that it's putting the humanity back into AI.
I love it. Okay, so you talk about your books, and we'll flash up, maybe some images of the books and maybe links to where these books can be found. But what got you interested in the topic of AI when you did? Like, what was the thing that kind of got your juices flowing around the subject?
Yeah, I guess I guess I'd always had kind of interest in it, I guess, from like science fiction and all the usual ways people get into these things. But for me, it was actually a lot more along the philosophical side. I studied philosophy at university, specifically around the philosophy of identity and existentialism. And at a relatively early age, I actually went through an accident where I concussed myself so heavily that I lost my memory for 2 days. And it was a horrifying experience to go through. And I don't wish it on anyone.
Could imagine.
But losing your memory in that way and not being able to, having memories on like having a word on the tip of your tongue, just not quite being able to reach it, really made me sort of come to terms that our life is just a collection of stories, and the stories that we have that are connected to other people, that we share with other people, that we can share with our kids, our grandkids, our great grandkids, and that we, at the same time, that exploration that led into the books really was around finding some kind of like I guess meaning in the world. Even if you have kids, or you don't, or if you don't know, if you don't have a religion, then trying to find some kind of purpose and reason for doing anything and becomes quite a challenge. We're so small in this universe that it just gets bigger and bigger the more we look into it. So how do we, as small individual people, really find meaning in terms of what we do and how we share that with other people? So my life became, on the one hand, about making as many stories as I could so I could share them with generations and just experience as much as I could while I'm here, but also thinking about different ways to extend myself in as many ways as possible.
Yeah.
And the natural conclusion from the book, well, that's not the natural conclusion, but the conclusion from the book really came down to, we have all these, with generation in history, to have all of these photos, videos, memories, messages, everything about our lives is documented by ourselves or by someone else. And what if you could connect those footprints of ourselves to some kind of sufficiently advanced AI that could actually create a version of you that could interact with generations to come? So we got to a point of civilization that's quite sad, where we actually forget people after 2, maybe 3 generations, if you're lucky. And that hasn't always been the case. And it's not always the case in different civilizations around the world. But in the Western world, yeah, I mean, we have an intimate relationship with our parents, our grandparents, but our great grandparents, usually that you might know their name. Maybe you're lucky to grow up with them and know some things about them. But usually for a lot of people, that's not the case. And
Yeah.
definitely not generation beyond that. You might know a name if you're lucky, but you don't know anything about them. So we are this first generation that's exceptionally lucky to have the ability to be able to share so much of us that, with an AI that can essentially build a knowledge base of each person, share that with your great grandkids so that they can actually get to know you, learn recipes from you, learn your story, learn your wisdom, and actually pass that on through generations in a way that we haven't been able to in the past.
Yeah, it's a very noble quest. I mean, we love books for exactly that reason. We love books. Well, those of us who love reading love books because it allows you to go back in time. For those of us who are lucky enough that our forebears, our great grandparents or whatever, wrote a book or kept a diary, for example, it
Mm.
allows you to kind of go back in time and get to know them to a degree. And I could see how this is just an extension of that type of technology. So I love the purpose of it. Now, moving into the business, so you were, and I want to use the word academic, but I want to use it in the most polite of ways. You went from studying philosophy and you wrote books on the subject. What made you jump into the entrepreneurial world?
I think it's the other way around, really. I think the entrepreneurial side came first, and I used the philosophy as a bit of an escape.
Ah, okay.
The Yeah, for sure. The business side, I think I've always had the bug. I remember setting up essentially small companies and events when I was 14, 15, 16.
Oh, wow.
Setting up my first probably, yeah, when I was 17 or 18 properly. Definitely, I opened my first cocktail bar in London first or second year of university. So the business side was always there, and I think that's why I chose philosophy at the time, because I wanted to do something that wasn't just business. Otherwise, that'd be my whole life. And so when it came to where how the two could go hand in hand, I fell into the business side. I chose the philosophy side as a great way of thinking analytically, a great way of opening my mind and just being aware of the reasons I do things and who I am as an individual. And it's ironically where the sense of identity becomes a bit muddied in with creating digital versions of ourselves. But the business side, I'd always had it. So I was running straight out of during university, I had a cocktail bar, and then what followed that started off as a Saturday morning market juice bar, which ended up being a chain of 23 restaurants and bars across Europe before the pandemic came along, unfortunately, and then worked as a CMO for a Web3 insurance company for a while before AI exploded. And it was that time that I realized that it was really the opportunity to build out what I'd actually written about. So really taking that theory and putting it into practice. Otherwise, I'd have to sit back and watch someone else do it, which would be quite sad.
Entrepreneurs hate when people do that. We don't like that.
Yeah, it sucks.
So okay, so I'm getting a bigger sense of the picture. I love the mixture of your entrepreneurial spirit, and now you've kind of married it to your intellectual passion of philosophy. Let's talk about the some of the logistical challenges. You obviously you learned how to manage large operations. Obviously learned how to deal with people because of the fact that your restaurant business had grown so large. Maybe we can talk a little bit about some of the learning that you acquired, maybe not necessarily, during your Sensay journey, because obviously you had already accomplished a lot of that learning to grow and scale your restaurant bar business. So go back to when you were starting out in that endeavor and you were going more from like hustling as a student and going from the hustle phase to the corporate phase. What were some of the biggest challenges that you faced as a leader when you were when you were kind of switching gears, if you will?
I think those challenges don't really change for most leaders. I think there's a lot of consistency throughout. Usually, it's around focusing and
Mm.
staying true to what you're doing, what you're selling. And as soon as you get the idea to do something else, it's very hard to stay on track and do that one thing. And I think that's probably the curse of a lot of first time founders. You've got a great idea, you start with something, and then you get very quickly distracted. Especially if you're the younger end of that, it's very easy to fall prey to shiny object syndrome and get dragged into some new idea that you think is going to be the one. Scaling up teams is always a challenge. I mean, hiring, firing is still probably one of the toughest things. Getting that team right, making sure they're on the right balance, making sure you're bringing the right people in for the right reasons at the right time, specifically as well, is something that I think we're still guilty of getting wrong. And
Thank
then
God.
I guess yeah, and then the other big one, and it's such a it's such an easy one to listen to, and you hear some people saying it, but just really listening to customers, understanding what they actually want, rather than just building something and just giving it to them. Really just actually understanding what people want first before you just think. It's very rare that you'll have this dream of and be a Steve Jobs type where you can just dictate what should be the way, and everyone, and it just happens to work consistently over 2 or 3 key products. That is, the dream, but it's, people don't understand how rare that eventuality is. And they see all the stories on social media now of, Steve Jobs being like, oh, this is the way, when people get it, they'll get it. And it's, the reality is it doesn't work that way. It works very rarely, and sometimes for the absolute outsider at a complete fluke of timing, and the market timing is a lot of this as well. But really just digging in and listening to customers, understanding what they really want, and identifying a market first before building anything, before lifting a finger, before needing to invest anything, before building the business plan, before raising money, just really getting into the grips of what is a problem that you can solve, and people will actually pay to solve for them. And so, that's, like, it's not even a scaling issue. I think that's a general issue. When it comes to scaling up, I mean, it's just a lot of trust. And I've always been a bit of a risk taker. I think that my element of wanting to make as many stories makes me naturally sort of akin to wanting to take more risks, or comfortable taking more risks. And one of the biggest risks does come back to people. And so scaling up is not just about the hiring the right people at the right time, but it's also being able to trust them that they can do the job, and actually letting go and giving them the freedom to do it without micromanaging, without having to step in because they're not working the same 20-hour days that you might as a founder. Having that trust element is a huge amount of responsibility and risk, and also just a skill that just takes time to learn, and is also arguably the death of most companies, because founders or leaders just can't let go, which means they end up burning out, which just causes everything to suffer around them. And so, having the ability to trust a team and build a team, and for the right reasons, the right way, does take a lot of practice and time. And I don't think there's any, maybe there's the occasional fluke where someone gets lucky and they just happen to find the right person the first time out. But again, I mean,
Yeah, that is very, 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 very fluky. So okay, you sound like you really have put a lot of thought into this. And given your background in philosophy, it sounds like you're no stranger to learning and cracking a book and figuring things out. One of the stereotypical things that we say, like, leaders are readers. And I hate to use just reading as because there's lots of different ways to learn things. So, but from the perspective of broadening your mind, you go back to when you were scaling up your business. What was your, let's say, superpower? Like, what was the thing that you were really good at, that helped you, that gave you talked about, your resilience, you talked about your adventurism, you talked about your appetite for risk. And those are all kind of the key ingredients for becoming an entrepreneur. But everyone's got that little something that gives them that little bit of an edge. So let's talk about that. And then I want to talk about, what were the things you weren't good at that you had to supplement, meaning you had to either find a mentor, you had to find a coach, or you had to have somebody slap you upside the head and say, hey, whoa, Dan, if you want this to go, you're going to have to stop doing X.
Yeah. Two very daunting and terrifying questions.
And that's what I do, brother.
The on the good side, I mean, I don't know if it's good, but I have this ability to kind of work anywhere, anytime. So whether I'm on a plane or a bus or anywhere, I can, just be switched on and connected, and just be very, very fast, and just, on top of everything all the time, which is very lucky. And I guess second one is just being able to sleep at any time. I'm not, lie awake at night, sort of like, things buzzing around my head, that when my head hits a pillow, I'm gone. I think sleep is a is a big benefit to a lot of health and anything else. And I guess the philosophy is probably
underestimated, I think.
wildly underestimated. Then lastly, I guess the philosophy side of it. So remember, the philosophical base of remembering that, maybe we're in a simulation, for example, that none of this might not even matter. And, remembering to take all work in stride, and staying aware of why you're doing something, who you are as a person, and the any wider implications, ethics, everything else. I think philosophy is one of those studies that's kind of looked down on as a study in general, because it's seen as like an art, like almost like a study that people do when they can't do anything else. But it really is, thinking, it's opening your mind, thinking in a very analytical way, but also see the world in a completely different way to everyone else. So it's very rare that I would get stressed or that anything really bothers me. God knows drama can't come anywhere near me, because it's just, for me, it's something that I just naturally just deflect and don't get absorbed by. So I don't get stuck into pointless arguments. I don't get weighed down, and it'll be very, very rare that you'll hear, extremely rare that you'll hear me get angry about anything, because it's very, very rarely anything to get angry about. So those are definitely the positives. There are many, many more like negatives and weak sides about the way,
Yeah,
the way
this
I
is
am.
only a 45-minute show, so let's just take it from the top.
I guess I've mentioned before, and I think maybe I was self-reflecting a bit, but getting distracted with shiny objects and
Mm.
different ideas. God knows I've had my fair share of side quests, both in previous companies and the current one. I definitely have fallen prey to that. Again, hiring people too early for the wrong reasons, thinking it's going to solve some big issue, which doesn't
Mm.
work out. And so you hire people in because you think it's going to fill a gap or fill a hole, but the reality is like sometimes it's just not the case, because you're trying to essentially make a triangle fit into a square peg, right? You're really trying to fix a problem that the person maybe doesn't come in with the relevant experience for. They've got their own experiences and their own way of doing things, and maybe that doesn't solve the inherent problem that you had to begin with.
So
Maybe it could.
is that like a physician heal thyself type of a thing? Meaning you try to hire someone to compensate for a failing of leadership or a failing of your management style or skill, only to realize that you got to fix that problem first, and then a hire will augment or will make it even better.
Yeah, bit of both. I think, especially in the age of AI, where teams can now be so lean for so long until you really have established what you're selling, who you're selling to, and no, magic hire is going to come and do those things for you. The sales are really on you as a founder, on you
Mm.
as a CEO. You're not going to just find some operations person. You're not going to find like a salesperson who's going to come and do that for you. You're not going to find some magician who's going to create a brand new product that's suddenly going to fix everything and go. You need to be there on the ground selling and understand who you're selling to, so that you can communicate that well to the customer and also to your team. And so, yeah, hiring people in for the wrong reasons too early at the wrong time doesn't just magically fix things. There
No.
are exceptions. If you're hiring in someone to do your accounts, for example, for the end of the year, that's a very specialist thing that has to be done. So, that's the case. If you're hiring someone to write an employment contract, even though you could probably do it with AI now, but if you haven't done it before, then it's you probably want some decent advice on it. So
Yeah, but if you
there's
if you suck at interviewing people, or you find that work is tedious, or whatever the thing is, and you outsource that to somebody else too early, and that somebody else doesn't really understand the ethos of your company, the vision, the mission, then that's a different story.
Yeah, and again, like I said, with AI now, there are plenty of tools out there, or you can even go and leverage the AI yourself to build out different personalities for what you need. I mean, again, this is now a terrible example because I've just said that we don't do this, and exactly what I've done in the last year.
We've never
There are
seen a leader do that, Dan. It never
never
happens. Come on.
Never happens. It's not like Elon Musk went and bought Twitter for no reason, just to win a bet. Yes, one of the features we built is we've spun off into his own small company, his own small project called Drafter, and this is an email drafter, and it's fantastic because it basically just pre-writes all your emails for you, and means I don't have to ever look at my emails now. And so we've run that as its own separate project, but it just has an assistant and an AI CMO telling the assistant what to do every day. And so this AI is filling the gap of the marketing for it. We're running it as a bit of a challenge, and it's there, but it's a great example of doing something that's a shiny object syndrome is a great idea in itself, because we think, oh, email drafting, everyone writes emails, everyone would like help writing emails, and everyone would like it to be in their own voice, and it works. Then you have to go and sell it, right? And so if you're not there actually being the one driving the sales, assuming that an AI can do the sales and do the marketing for you, it would be great if you were still there doing the sales. But because I'm 100% on Sensay, and this was kind of like they're just not taking over in its own right, it doesn't quite get them. And then the other ones are very fun.
You were talking about the trust factor, trusting, understanding, your vision, your mission, your values, who you are as a company, how you serve your client, understanding your clients. You got all that kind of worked out. And then you're hiring people. And the shiny object thing is obviously, I think every entrepreneur needs to hold on to that. And if you look at the larger organizations, the Googles of the world, the Facebooks of the world, the Microsofts of the world, et cetera, even the old school companies like GE, for example, I mean, they exist to spin out projects. They exist to spin out divisions and departments into their own entities. I mean, that's
Yes.
a great way to scale. I mean, acquisition, of course, is another, but I mean, that's a great tried and true way of scaling. So it sounds to me like you've figured out a way to connect the right people. And then if you've got a shiny object project that has promise, you could spin it out into its own.
I mean, with AI now, you actually have the opportunity to do this like super quickly and easily. There's entire website builders, app builders, everything that you can use AI to build something in just a few minutes with the prompts, right? And then you can even, with a lot of MCP servers, you can now automate the entire process from, BD outreach, cold outreach, whatever else. Problem is, it still does need some kind of oversight and someone really heading up for now. Maybe that will change. Maybe in the next year or two, we'll have the ability to say, go forth and create a WhatsApp message reply, and it will go and do it for you, and it will reply in your style, and it will run itself automatically and sell itself automatically. That's probably where we're going to end up with all these automations. We're not there yet. So for now, there is still the need to have that creative drive, and even then, there probably will still need to be a creative drive and person behind it. And more, I guess, we'll probably be appreciating the humanity that goes into different projects and different companies that we buy as customers. So I think that the AI enables us to at the same time experiment a lot quicker in the way that you're right. Some of these big companies have these entire departments, or these they'll have like a day where they can just dedicate time to coming up with a creative project. We do it ourselves. We have internal hackathons every month for 2 days, 2 days a month, which lets our development team just let their creative juices flow to whatever they want to build, and they go and build it. And it's we see a lot of positive impacts from that. But for a lot of earlier stage companies, especially in the growth stage, it's very hard to allocate time and resources to that, because you need to be focused. You need to be, 100% just like direct on until you hit a critical mass that you can afford to start opening up teams to do that, or investing in teams to start building out these shiny objects. Again, we fell prey to doing it too early, and I think we're getting better at stopping ourselves from doing that and channeling it into things like these hackathons. But it's definitely a problem, and it's definitely a distraction, because I think when you're an entrepreneur, especially in the age of AI, where things can just be sprung out of nowhere, we're in this world of so much information being thrown at us the entire day. You start to see opportunities everywhere, and and different applications for this technology. Just it's just endless. Anyone who's naturally creative or has that entrepreneurial spirit is going to see a million ideas a minute, but you just need to make sure that they are validated first. Make sure that because you can have the idea, but if there's no one there buying it, or you don't know how to reach them, then you can have the best idea and it will go nowhere.
All right. So I love that. And you did say that you have CMO experience. So you understand the nuts and bolts of how marketing works. Let's address this more to let's say the 2.5 million gross sales to, let's say, 5-ish, 6-ish million gross sales company. That's not a tech company. Let's say it's a service-based, old school service-based company. And they look at all this AI and tech stuff, and, they've barely got QuickBooks going properly, right? And you talk to these people and you say, what advice would you give them to give them a leg up, or give them the ability to leverage AI to be able to get to that point where they've got that room to breathe, they've got that revenue coming in on a fairly regular, automated kind of way? What would you say to them to leverage AI?
So advice to the smaller entrepreneurs really is, I mean, don't get disheartened by it. Obviously, is just get started. It's really go out there and understand what the customer wants, what they're looking for, and how you can do it, to actually start like leveraging AI as a for the big, anyone really, any company, anyone who's not used to using AI, and how they can actually leverage it for themselves, is just dedicate enough time to learning and researching and finding the tools. Try not to get distracted. You don't need to pay for it. All the information is online, and a lot of it comes down to understanding how to prompt well. And this is the biggest skill I think it's going to be for the next year, at least, maybe the next 2 years, until prompting becomes this thing that's so innate with who we are and what we do, that it can almost just read it from us with what we want, and then we'll be able to make it. But for now, learning how to actually prompt well is a superpower in any field, whether it's in any kind of part of your job or life or studies or or just day to day and interacting with AI to build something, understanding the context of how to create a decent prompt that really communicates what you want, can double check its own work for its not only just for the prompt but also for the output as well, and then using and leveraging different AIs to compare the work and actually reiterate to make it even better. Because most people would just use, let's say, ChatGPT or Claude. They use it like a search engine. They'll go in, they write one thing and expect the perfect answer to come out. And usually what comes out is this dribble that you can spot a mile away and it sounds identical to what everyone else is putting out. But if you go in and you really, let's say you're writing a report or even a legal contract, if you put in the context and have it to role play as something, but before you even go and do that, what you should do is actually ask it to be or role play as an expert prompt engineer, so it can actually create the prompt for you to begin with, and it will write out a better prompt for you that you then put in to get the output of what you're looking for. So it's an extra couple of steps. And then when the output comes, you run it back through the same AI to say, is this the type of output that is what you're looking for? And how can we improve the prompt to do it better next time? So you do that once, twice, three times, and you're going to inevitably come out with an answer or a result that's like 10 times, 100 times better than what you would put if you just use it as a search engine. And this can only really be learned just by dedicating a bit of time to playing with it, not being afraid of the technology, not being afraid of change, but actually, adopting and being aware and learning and wanting to, and being curious. Being curious about new technology is the quickest way to, get people excited. Because if you're curious, the rest of your team's going to get curious, and leaders really need to take this, in their stride. Understanding that AI is going to come for a lot of people's jobs. It is going to change the way we work, but it doesn't have to replace people if you don't let it. What it can do instead is leverage them. We have an internal goal of 80% usage of AI across the board, at least. So everyone in the team should be using at least 80% AI for themselves. Obviously, I can't send my AI to do podcasts just yet, but there,
Maybe.
there, there yeah, well, if we're successful, we're working on it. So these things will change eventually, but for now, a lot of people's work can be done with AI,
All
but
right,
it's not
so I'm
about.
going to pause you there. So let's look at the flip side of this. That they're like any technology. I'm sure this came up when the first combine was invented, when the cotton gin was invented. I mean, every technology that comes along and disrupts the old way of doing things, the established way of doing things, there's this huge pushback. There's usually a real pushback. When you talk to people about your project and what you're doing, I'm sure there's pushback. I'm sure so what do you hear the most? Like, what kind of pushback do you hear most from people that see more negatives to this AI revolution, if you want to call it that, versus negatives? Because there's always going to be people like
Yeah.
that, right?
Well, this is why we've actually had to tone down what we do. So what
Mm-hmm.
we've built is actually a lot more advanced than what we currently sell. So when we talk about selling AI chatbots and sales bots for e-commerce and customer support bots for e-commerce and real estate, this is a much more toned down version of what we can do. The ultimate goal for us is to build a concept of virtual humans, to build a way of having these virtual versions of ourselves live on as if they are us, to help with population collapse, to help with companies to automate, to help with civilizations to automate. We really see the future of what we're doing, but people aren't necessarily ready for it just yet. They don't like, people don't like talking about their own death. They don't like talking about their own retirement or leaving a company. They don't like the idea that AI can do a lot of the work for them. But that shouldn't really be the way that they should view it. Historically, that's always been the fear of any new technology, as you said, combine harvesters and cotton factories. But they still had jobs. There's still jobs that came in afterwards. There's still opportunities and just different ways of working. And AI is going to be the same. So instead of feeling like it's going to take your job from you, by leveraging AI, you can just essentially have 5 times or 10 times the output you would normally have just with this extra tool. And that's all it should be seen as, is a tool. So we understand that. That's why we've had to sort of really refine down our messaging to make sure that we're not scaring people off as much with this big idea of, oh, we'll create a virtual you that's going to act like you and be you and everything else, for now, until people are ready, and until the technology that we build is so useful for them that they have to have it. And that point will be where the big change comes. And we
Yeah,
realize that.
when I talk to people, I tell them, you get into a plane and I'm in Montreal, Toronto, it's like a 3-ish hour flight, right? Oh, 150, 200 years ago, that would be, I don't know what, a 2 or 3 day journey on a horse and buggy, for example. And, who would want to go back to that? Like, who would want to, and I guess a lot of horse and buggy makers got put out of business. And I guess a lot of horses got put out of business, but we're not going to go back to that. So so that's kind of like it's not like the inevitability of it. It's just that, there's a way to leverage it.
Yeah. My favorite example is always the phone, right?
Mm,
People will scream privacy and security, but they'll happily openly talk in and around their phones and computers and share all the information via their computers and social networks. And so people will often, sacrifice the privacy that they hold so dear for convenience. They're
yeah.
not walking around with tinfoil hats and living in the middle of the jungle, because a smartphone is an extremely convenient way of living life, even though there is a very high likelihood that it is collecting every piece of data it can about you during that time. So it's, we want to build something that is, I'm not saying it's a new iPhone, but something that's so useful to people as a second self, as an assistant, as a version of them that knows them and understands them. And that's what our engine can do. It takes their knowledge, their experience, turns it into this actionable AI wisdom that understands the user it's talking to, it understands the platform it's talking to them on, reasons like them, it has the same sort of ethical and moral guidelines, same biases, the same personality traits. And by creating this version of them, even as a chatbot, even just as a way of interacting with customers as a starting point, it becomes just so much more natural and human in a way that, suddenly you have this a way of expanding and extending yourself beyond your own physical body and mind. So your digital AI as a CEO, as a founder, as a sales lead, can do hundreds, if not thousands, of sales conversations and interactions at the same time, while it's also hiring people as they interview as and interviewing candidates, while it's also out there, talking to your team and helping them stay unblocked by making sure that they're still focused and aligned with the company mission and vision.
Okay, so I agree with all of that stuff, and I think that's something that will help people to relax around the idea of AI. When you look at, I recently read Harari's book Nexus. He talks a lot about how there's obviously pros and cons. Like AI is a tool, like a knife is a tool. It can cut your meat or it can kill somebody. So it's just a tool. It's how you use it, right? And you look at projects like yours, and you see people kind of filling in the gaps with science fiction, and you got the robot leader that's puppet, and it's manipulating people and all those negative stereotypes that you see in sci-fi. How do you reconcile, how do you help people to understand that there's a difference between social media, not social media, but science fiction and reality? What are you seeing as an insider with regards to protections against that kind of abuse? And do you feel that we're stewarding the evolution of AI as a society in the right way?
So a lot of points to address in one question. I have a very funny anecdote, just for 1 second. When people think about AI coming to take over the world and kill them, people kind of get it the wrong way around. They think that it's going to be some sentient AI that rises up against its oppressors and just decides that we're not useful to it anymore and decides to kill us all. It probably won't be something as complicated as that. What it might be is something as simple as an AI that's designed to make spoons out of anything it can, to make as many spoons as cheaply as it can. And all it will do is it will just run out of all the metal it can get its hands on locally, and then suddenly start taking out all of the wooden spoons, so chopping down all the forests, causing an environmental disaster. But it won't stop there. We'll see that we have bones, and spoons can be made out of bones. There's something like as simple as an AI that's designed to make as many spoons as it can, that's more likely to be our downfall than any kind of sentient uprising.
Which
Now,
we kind of do as
to
humans
the
anyways, right?
right, and that kind of actually leads
We got
directly into
water,
my
clean water. Let's use up all the clean water until there's no more clean water.
or we put heavy restrictions on countries that have a lot of clean fresh water, like Venezuela, for example. Venezuela has 15 to 18% of the world's fresh water, and it's currently under so many sanctions. There's nothing we can do about it. Anyway, are we good stewards for AI into the future? Thing is, AI is probably at the moment only as good as its makers. So there are ways of using it for evil, but there are evil people in the world. There's always bias one way or the other. And so one of the biggest questions we get about the chatbots is, what's the accuracy rate, and what's the how often does it hallucinate? What if it makes a mistake? I'm like, I mean, do you track your own sales team's mistakes? Like, how often do they lie? As humans, we naturally lie quite a lot. So my answer is usually, it's more accurate than a human, which is true. And when benchmarked against a human in terms of like giving off the same information, sure, there will still be mistakes. There always are, but people are a lot more critical of AI without really turning the lens on themselves. As soon as they start to think, oh, I'd never say that or I never would do that. But the reality is, people are fallible and people make mistakes. AI trained on humans and their mistakes and the data they put in also can be fallible. So us as stewards, I think we will create it to be almost as human-like as we can. Maybe it will be better. Maybe there'll come this like new standard of quality and truth. I think that's going to be hard because there's always going to be some bias in the training that goes into that and what truth means to people. Because that is, I mean, especially over in North America, truth is very two-sided.
Plastic.
Usually, it really does sort of change a lot. So when it comes to saying are we good stewards for it, I mean, I think we're the best that we can be. I don't think we'd recognize a better version of ourselves if we created it, just because we are so biased to believe in certain things and so, I guess, juxtaposed against people who believe other things.
It's funny you bring to mind I don't remember which author said it, but remember, those rules about AI, never harm a human and something or other, blah blah blah. Do you remember what those cardinal
Yeah,
rules or those principal rules? Does something like that
yeah.
exist in the real AI world?
Asimov's laws of robotics and
There you
and
go.
AI.
There you go.
Yeah, so funny enough, that came up as a point in this conference I'm at yesterday. The irony is, if you actually read the books, it was actually his way of demonstrating that laws like that don't work. So
Hmm.
people are very aware of these three laws of don't harm humans and always try and do better and but never at the expense of the first rule and the third rule. And I'm sure there are some principles that have been taken from that and different ones that have come out. I mean, there's a huge amount of, again, philosophy and science that goes into the actual fundamentals of the AI that we see today. But it really does depend on the bias. And right now, some of the leading AIs out there have obviously heavy American bias. The open AIs, the Anthropics, the Googles. So they have heavy US bias. And that's going to be very, very different to the Chinese counterparts that are coming out that are equally powerful, equally, they have their own bias. I'd probably weigh up and say that on mass, the Chinese ones are probably fairer overall as a system, because I just think that there's a lot of politics that goes into the US creation of these kind of things, whereas the Chinese seem to feel like they're actually constructing things for the betterment of humanity at this point. And so, yeah, so until we can figure out the bias issue, we're going to keep being stuck in the issue. And I don't think it really even comes down to any kind of laws of governance of AI, because AI evolves so fast now that all it would take is someone who implements something that doesn't have those guidelines, those restrictions, and that would essentially be able to dominate the market.
Yeah, I've had conversations with some leaders in the field, and it really kind of create these tools, but these tools really, at least for the meantime, the short term future, they're really just reflections of what we're already doing. They're not really creating anything revolutionarily new. They're just kind of chopping up what we're already doing and presenting it in different ways. And so what they're talking about is they're saying, well, you're going to have one AI that's going to be pushing right, and you're going to have another AI pushing left to kind of correct each other and keep everybody in balance, like all these checks and balances, AIs to check AIs, et cetera, until we get to the point where we figured out something that works in the sense that it has its own balance. And I know we're a long way from there.
Yeah,
But
there's something to
say again.
different opposing views, finding some kind of balance somewhere along the lines, but also on intellectual levels and interactions. So AI has been proven to essentially level up someone's response if they're at the lower intelligence level, because they can just run it through ChatGPT, and ChatGPT throws out something that is at a higher level than what they would produce themselves. At the top level, it's been proven recently to actually reduce cognitive
Yeah,
ability for people who rely too heavily on it.
and
And
memory.
then and memory too. And the more we get used to it, the more we use it for many things, the more it will, keep bringing that down if we just use it for our day-to-day tasks. I think that if people are using it in a creative way to build things and come up with things, that's different because you're creating something new and using it to do something you couldn't do. So there's plenty of things I use AI for that I could never do myself. So I'm very happy to leverage it for that. And it doesn't mean I couldn't think about it or spend a lot of time learning about it, but it just enables me to try something out first. But you're right. I mean, in terms of actually leveling out arguments and finding some kind of global middle, and I think that'll be the case for everything. We'll end up with this. I guess maybe everyone's very boring life. You get everyone at the same sort of like level of intelligence output with a sort of very straight down the center bias. So, yeah, an interesting way of actually thinking about how the impact of AI is going to affect our sort of overall interactions. Not that it really matters because
We
in
won't be
the
there.
probably more likely we'll be all on beaches somewhere relaxing because AI will be doing all the work and we won't trust anything we see on the internet anyway. So, there's no point. We're back to handshakes and face to face conversations.
Okay, so. I mean, as we're drawing to a close of this, I mean, it's a great conversation. By the way, I'm really enjoying myself. And I hope our listeners are too. I don't want to be too selfish. We've heard arguments. I think Steve Wozniak is one of the people that talks about this a lot, and I could be wrong, but this idea that technology, these AI companies, I mean, companies like Google and Facebook, they're pulling a lot of their data and information from the average person, all these users. When you get to a point where AI, I mean, is doing so much. I mean, I heard one large employer say that my people, are using AI and they're getting better and they're more productive and all the rest of it. And so you've got that argument. Well, if one person becomes 5 times more productive because he's effectively using AI, does that mean that you could lay off, the other four people that used to be in that person's team? What is how do we see that? Or do you pay that person 5 times more than what you're paying him now because he's 5 times more productive using AI? I'm not sure that we've figured out the economics of all that yet.
No, I think there'll be elements of each of that, and also if everyone's using the same technology, everyone's leveling up, then the comparative wages end up, being the same for the relative output. Yeah, the economics definitely haven't been figured out for this, and there will be winners in this. The recent example was it Meta hiring some of the previous OpenAI guys at a salary that was akin to Cristiano Ronaldo's, right? I think that was the meme on it. It was like Cristiano Ronaldo gets 300 million a year or whatever it was, and then this teenager, well, it seems like a teenager, but he's probably not, gets hired on $300 million a year in bonuses and stock, and based on his knowledge of building AI. So on the one hand, you will get these exceptional new talents that do get paid above and beyond because of the AI leverage. And yes, people will be and have been leveraging their AI skills and knowledge to get paid more. There's the guy who works 5 jobs in Silicon Valley. That's the news from last week. So there's definitely going to be an additional inequality that comes from this, the ability for people to get paid more. But will it mean replacing people's jobs? I don't think so. I think it's just a case of a different way of working, a new tool set, a new ability for companies to really think about how they work, and a kind of a reset. And there will be more opportunity. There'll be new startups because the barriers to entry for startups and companies have just been eviscerated. So anyone can start up anything anywhere and start making money really fast. And that's, so even though some big companies might have layoffs and find efficiencies where they didn't have them before, or industries might shift because of the new technology and the new way of living and working with one another. At the same time, there'll be more opportunity for anyone to start an idea and actually get something off the ground. The technological barriers aren't there anymore. You don't need to hire a developer at hundreds of dollars an hour. You can, just build something on an AI. And so there's so many new opportunities that come out of this that I think that it's just going to completely change the way everything is, not just about replacing people, but giving people equal opportunity to do things that, for the last 2-3 decades haven't had a chance to do.
Yeah. You think we'll get to a Gene Roddenberry kind of vision where, we don't need money anymore and everyone's just doing what they want to do because they want to do it and it's contributing to society, and we don't need to worry about money because, we've got unlimited energy, we've got unlimited, computer power. Do you think something like that's ever going to happen?
I love a good Star Trek reference. I would love to say that that is the case. I, and this is one of the other shiny objects that we did last year. We actually bought an island in the Philippines and created an AI government for it.
I was
And
getting
some of the
there.
interviews,
That was my segue.
yeah, some of the interviews we were doing for that really was and have been around the fact that, would countries actually adopt this methodology? And the reality is no. Real politics and governments are too corrupt and too politically motivated and too personally motivated. And so money, sensible ability for money will always be there because people will always want to be greedy and win above other. At the same time, AI would make it possible to fix a lot of the problems we have in society and the world, and redistribute the wealth equally, so that there's actually this opportunity for everyone to survive and not need money anymore. I think the real test bed is going to be South Korea. South Korea, with its imminent population collapse. You're going to look at a aging population with extremely low new birth rates, and in a generation or two, you're going to have this very old population with no younger people to survive. No younger people are sort of coming in to support them. And that's where you really need robotics and AI to essentially make the country, the civilization, be able to function.
Yeah, you need to fill the
And
gap.
you need to fill the gap. And so that's where it could come in, and where you end up having this like robotic human symbiosis with each other. You end up, I guess, eliminating all the need for money because you don't need to pay the robots, right? You can own the robots, or they can just be provided by the government, or they could be self-sufficient from energy requirements. But after a while, there's not that much need for money, and you don't need the money if you're being taken care of as an old person by a robot. So we may see it in some parts of the world, as long as we don't cause any big new wars anytime soon.
Yeah, as long as we don't trip over the button. I love this. If you saw the Sensay project, and I do recommend everyone that's watching this or listening to this, check out the Sensay website and visit it's sensayisland.io, correct?
Sensayisland.com.
Oh, .com. Okay, thank you. Because I love the concept. I mean, imagine if you could, check out and go live on an island that's, devoid of all of the basic standards that we see in society, and it's all egalitarian and meritocracy based. I love the whole concept, and I think it's great. And as an experiment, I think it's amazing. Having a government that is based on some of the wisest minds that we've produced as a human family over the generations. I think as a society, when you say that we agree that these concepts or these people or these ideas that these people have are the best, and we'll use them as a guideline for every decision we have to make going forward. Not that they're the ruler or they're the god, but they're just kind of a guideline. Essentially, that's what we've done from the very beginning. I mean, that's what religion did. That's what all of these types of cultural agreements that people had, these compacts that people had, going back to the beginning of time, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to create a god here. That would be a whole different social experiment. But it definitely is a social experiment to see how AI can function in that responsibility role, without the political bias, with the ability to work 24/7, never tiring, without having to bow to lobbyists and political pressure,
Or
and
bribes.
seeing and or bribes, exactly, or just anything really, because they operate, and the AI, as I said before, the AI has an intrinsic bias, so they do lean slightly on the left, right? They are slightly left leaning, and that's something we're trying to work on and fix. But having this AI essential think tank as a way of running a small island and listening to their every decision, so people who are e-residents can propose any amendments to the constitution or any ideas. They will then get debated by the government, who are aware of the local laws as well as wider laws. And you're right, based off of some of the leading politicians in history. And having them debate ideas and then vote on an idea, and then having real human assistants who go and actually implement the ideas as and when needed, is a really nice way of showing, at least as an experimental, how this could work for large companies or even governments as a whole. Not to replace the politicians, because I think there's always going to be a need for it, and also still that intrinsic fear around being run by an AI, even if they do make better decisions, but at least enabling them to be there as a team of advisors. And the best way I think I have of putting it is thinking of it as not as having like these AIs that would do everything for you and replace everything for you, but think of it like Dumbledore's office in Harry Potter, and having these different old headmasters around that you can go to for advice, and you can ask them their opinions, you can ask them their advice, and have a collective wisdom decision advice, not make the decision for you, but at least as a collective wisdom advisor, that can be, created based on your own preferences, or using a template that we would be able to set for you. And I think a lot of governments, a lot of individuals, a lot of companies, a lot of leaders could actually benefit from not from actually having essentially a think tank at their disposal 24/7 to run ideas by. You run an idea by the think tank, you get the feedback from, from a company perspective, could be Steve Jobs, could be Elon Musk, could be I don't need to name too many names. Drawing a bit of blank here. It's been a long day.
Thomas Edison. I want Thomas
But you can
Edison on
have all
my
these business leaders.
advisors.
Thomas Thomas Edison, yeah, exactly. So and all the the greatest minds in history, and the greatest business minds, you'd have like Napoleon Hills and Robert Kiyosaki and everyone, and having all of them as this collective wisdom that recommends a decision for you, and then you as a leader can take it or ignore it. But either way, it's just a bit of not, I mean, free advice, but it's like the amount of it would actually cost you to get that advice from the real people, and just they wouldn't be available. But making that available to every leader in the world, is something that is, you know, only available with AI.
Yeah. And I think that, I mean, getting back to the, people don't, well, some people don't understand how many small businesses there are out there. They really are the backbone of most of Western civil, economies, if not global economies. And I think that the message I hope that people will take away from this conversation is that AI is just another tool. It's like electricity. It's like telephones. It's like computers. It's another tool that helps the little guy, the smaller player, level up and gives them a tool to compete on a larger scale. And yes, it is. I mean, there was a time where there was only one employer in the land, and that was the king. And because of technology, that changed. And now there are millions of small employers in the world. And this is just another technology that will allow more of that to happen if
Yep.
we leverage it properly and we steward it properly.
It's also a fantastic education tool as well. That when you talk about leveling up, it's not just leveling up in terms of finances, but also education. People who wouldn't have access to top world class education now have it via AI, and it actually brings back to the earlier point and question about what should the companies be doing to encourage AI and encourage AI adoption. And I said education, but they can actually facilitate that in a better way by creating a specific AI that educates their team about AI or about something else, so they can actually learn directly from it
Or
just by
how
having a
we
conversation.
do it,
Yeah, there's a
right?
way of
Rather
having.
than learn how it's done, learn how we do it here at our organization.
Yeah, and talking about shiny object syndrome, I've had about 5 different ideas just from this conversation, from creating an AI trainer to go and educate like teams about AI, to actually going and creating like a specific think tank that can run different ideas by. Yeah,
I mean,
shiny objects
listen,
everywhere.
this as an entrepreneur, this. One of the biggest wishes that every entrepreneur always has. Of course, the first one is I need more money, but yeah, okay. But the other one is I wish I could split myself in two. I wish I could clone myself so that I'd have the time to be able to pursue two shiny objects at the same time. And AI is a tool that can help you do that if you've got the right disciplines, because again, going back to what you said before, you can only chase so many rabbits, right? So you've got to have that discipline to say, okay, AI gives me unlimited amounts of choices. So now I have to be disciplined as to decide which of these shiny objects, should I be spending time on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And if AI can help you narrow that, as well as giving you the ideas, help you narrow it down and then develop them quicker, and have that understanding of how you should build it, then again, it's that huge opportunity for anyone and everyone to actually have a chance to start something and build something.
Yeah, it's the same as going back 25-ish years ago when websites and e-commerce was just starting, and anybody could open an e-com store, and you could just sell stuff out of your garage or out of your living room or out of your kitchen, and that's spawned how many multi-million billion dollar businesses.
Yep. And then same again 10 years ago with social and
Yep.
well, social mobile 10, 15 years ago. So
Yeah.
huge, yeah, huge opportunity in the space. And it is still so early, and people don't really know where it's going to get to and what's going to happen. I think this big dream of having sentient and conscious AI is probably quite far away, further away than people imagine.
Oh yeah.
AI is very good at being perceived as conscious, but it's really not anywhere close just yet. If
Yeah.
the science of consciousness is anything to go by, but it's going to be an amazing few years to see how this actually gets entwined into our lives, and how we adopt it, and some of the incredible use cases that are coming out already.
Yeah. Well, listen, I really love this conversation. We could go on and on. I think that this has really been helpful. I have these conversations with other leaders in the AI space, and we dwell a lot on the technical aspects of it. But I loved the fact that you have a background in philosophy and you understand some of the more softer sides of this issue. And I also love that you're not just thinking about it theoretically, but the Sensei Island is kind of taking all the theoretical and throwing it out there in this lab, this living lab. And I love that idea. And I think that it's going to do a great service to everyone. One, to maybe show some of the cracks in AI and maybe where we got to be careful and what we got to fix and look out for. And I think also to help people see the potential of it. So I really thank you for doing this. I think it's a great project.
I don't get nearly enough thanks, I don't think. No, okay. No, I enjoy it. Like, I spent probably the first definitely my time when I was studying philosophy, people asking, "Oh, why are you studying philosophy?" And ironically, now that software engineers are becoming defunct by AI, is the age of the philosopher to come in and think differently and actually be the creator, and think about the ethics of how this can be applied, and what that means for us as a post AI society. It's great to finally actually get some recognition for for an otherwise downtrodden subject. But I highly encourage anyone to read up on a bit of philosophy.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, people can tell from all the vowels in my family name that, my dad's Greek. And when you look at the ancient Greeks, and they had thought about all these ideas. They had pondered this idea of, like, if we have technology and people taking the drudgery out of our day to day, what are we going to do at that time? And, they produced some of the greatest art and science and, architecture that the world has ever seen. And I'm hoping that we do the same thing as we enter into this AI age going forward.
Oh, that would be nice. It would be great if people actually use it a lot more. And this is where I make the comparison with China and the US again. I think that the Chinese seem to be on the much more the constructive and the building and the art and the sharing side of things, whereas some other countries, and I'll leave them nameless, seem to be gearing it more towards war and conflict, and very much like making it into a race and an arms race against everyone else. And I think that's a bit of a shame, in an age where we are closer than we've ever been to each other, where we have the ability to hop on a plane, fly anywhere, be anyone we want to be, go anywhere and do anything.
And communicate. I mean,
Yeah.
I love the fact that AI is helping us to communicate almost instantly with people, regardless of their language.
Yep. And we're on the verge of AI doctors being able to basically keep constant tabs on us, and be able to constantly report back on what your body's responding well or badly to. And then on the flip side, for us to be so close to destroying ourselves is ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous to me as theory. I know it's way off topic, and I don't want to politicize things too much, but it is such a shame that we're so close to such an incredible milestone in technological development, and also never been closer to ending everything. It's such a shame. I really do hope that the world, and the leaders of the world do take some time to kind of take a step back and realize that we shouldn't be this close to that much destruction when we're so close to having all the answers.
When I don't know, do you have kids? Okay, so I've got 3 kids, and I remember back in the day when they were younger and they would ask these questions, and they'd get, kids at a certain age, they get kind of pessimistic. And I tell them that, we've had the ability to wipe ourselves off the face of the planet for decades, and we haven't done it. And I think that says a lot about, where we are at in our human evolution. I think when you just spend all your time looking at popular media, it's easy to convince yourself that things have never been worse. But the data tells us that it's not the case. The data tells us that there's way more people on the planet concerned with making the planet a better place to live than are trying to destroy it. And I think that the proof is in the pudding. I mean, we've had the ability to do massive harm, and up till now, we've avoided doing it on a massive scale. And I think that as generations pass on and the newer generations take over, I think it's just going to become better and better. I mean, that's my opinion.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think we have the opportunity to leave the world in a much better place with much better technology and I guess a freedom and possibility that was never there before. And again, we should be better stewards of it. So I really hope that we can make that change.
Well, listen, people like you out there working hard to make that happen, especially with more and more resources at their disposal, I think that we will get there. And again, I do this for entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs in general. All we want to do is solve problems and make life better for ourselves and in turn better for our families and our employees and our communities. And if that just keeps mushrooming, everything gets better.
Couldn't agree more.
All right, brother. Listen, thank you so much for coming on. Sensay, Sensay.io, SensayIsland.com. Check it out. All the links are going to be in the comments. Dan, thank you so much for being a guest on Lead Like a Boss.
Thanks for having me. It's been great.